Holy hell, this episode's taken quite a while to come out. With how frequent the patch notes have been and how dominant the rook meta has been recently, it's been really tough to write a script for anything since it changes not too long shortly after. So my apologies if the script is a little outdated, but there is one major point with Jamila I wanted to make sure to clarify on that didn't get it into the script that kind of changed recently. Regardless though, without any further ado, let's get into the analysis. Jamila in Battlerite is well known for both her high burst and sustain damage, while lacking in good defense or health sustain. This archetype is well known as a glass cannon and is very well portrayed in many fighting games such as Akuma in Street Fighter or Mewtwo in Smash 4. Generally speaking, this is a fun variation of character archetype that's really ingrained itself into competitive games as a whole. However though, in games like Battlerite, this can prove problematic as a character archetype, and I'm here to give you the analysis as to why I feel like Jamila is hard to balance. Taking a quick overview of her kit, Jamila fits really nicely into the archetype of glass cannon, but this works a little different in Mobilite games like Battlerite. The idea of a glass cannon type character in a team-based strategy game in general is a controversial topic in MOBAs already. You can see this pretty prominently in League whenever people talk about Zed, Yasuo, Fizz, Rengar, and loads more. These characters are generally very scary, as if you give them even a tiny bit of a lead, they'll start one-shotting almost anyone on the team. The counterbalance to this, though, is that they need the snowball to get things done most of the time, and being shut down early can leave them far behind everyone else in the game. On top of that, most of them are at least somewhat skill-based, so you have to know what you're doing with your lead in order to really be a devastating force. In a team-based objective game, their role becomes a whole lot more clear, however, it's very debatable from a game design standpoint. For the most part, if you're not able to one-shot the carry before you get one-shot as a glass cannon, you're not really doing your job. With this in mind, it makes these characters very hard to tweak with these sorts of roles in a team-based game. Take away the ability to one-shot people and they're not viable. If you adjust it a little too powerful, then they become instantly broken and they just steamroll everyone. So it's generally very hard to pull off things like this in this sort of game. Bringing the attention back to Jamila, however, she's in a completely different setting than League. Most notably, there's no way to increase or cap your damage output with items, which makes her balance significantly less flexible. This alone creates a gigantic issue whenever it comes to balancing. With no flexible damage variable, she's either doing too much or not enough, and I think she's leaning towards not enough. Don't get me wrong, she definitely shouldn't be one-shotting anyone like it's League, but with how her kit works, it's easy to see how her damage can be problematic. Jamila has probably the highest DPS with her autos out of anyone in the game, killing a 60 health dummy with just 2 strings, but how often she'll be able to get that ability to do so without being contested will be a little iffy from time to time. Since Jamila has a hard time escaping, with her only defensive option being her counter, she can't afford to overstay, being at the risk of being CC'd to death. You could use her space to escape, sure, but seeing how slow it is and how it doesn't really go anywhere without a wall or time to charge, we won't be referring to it as a viable defensive option. Outside of her sustained DPS, she also has an impressive amount of burst. Her stun can open up for an auto string or M2, not to mention how it can be used to hold someone down while your counter damage goes off. Jamila's main way of getting her damage off, without contention, is definitely her end cap. Although, downside being, it takes quite a long time to actually come out, and the cooldown is high as well, so you can't trade a feint for a counter because their counter will be back up before you can do it again. Then again, you can't really lower the cooldown or cast time too much because, well, it's an end cap that comes up every 8 seconds, and it costs 0 energy, so just having that would be completely absurd and broken for the character. Jamila overall does a lot of damage, such as her character archetype, and you can see this with how the developers make small tweaks to patch Jamila. And there's never anything too big, but just the right baby steps to get her where she might be one day viable. But with her archetype in mind, it's difficult to see in the near future when Jamila will be viable and balanced, where she's able to do a threatening amount of damage, but also isn't constantly being destroyed when she attempts to show all her strength, while all the while being balanced enough to be able to be punished. Now, that sounds like a lot of work for the developers to do. However, I bring up 2 points that could potentially save Jamila. It's hard to say that I don't see untapped potential with the character, comparing to her now to when she first came out. When she was first released, all the hype was around Jamila. Everyone wanted to play Jamila, as with any new character. But today, you don't really see anyone play Jamila that much, and when they do, it isn't the worst thing in the world. But on release, I gotta say, it ain't Jemima's Jamila. No. These Jamilas were awful. It got so bad that me and my team, whenever we had to play solo ranked, we would just queue as Jamila ourselves so we weren't matched with one, and then change to our mains in Champ Select. What's important to note from back then to now though is how much we've improved on the character and how much more we know about it. No one's trying to play her like a Croak and Sheaf hybrid anymore, as most people first seen her. There's been so much more improvement since then. How far player skill can go to make her viable, I can't say for sure, but I wouldn't expect it to be as drastic as say with Teo or Varish, but I do believe it will have a great impact on how we see the character. Now, since I first wrote the script, one of her Battlerites got reworked to put Phantom Cut on people, without the need of having to hit your counter. You might not see it at first, but the huge chunk of damage puts a lot of pressure on opponents to use their iframes to avoid the potential burst that she can deal alongside it. This changes a lot for Jamila, and dare I say, may even make her viable now, which makes this whole video redundant. Which is, why it took so long to make, that is. But I'll go more in depth with how it works whenever I make more in-depth, dedicated character videos. For now, what do you think? Agree with what I said? If not, elaborate in the comments below. I'd like to hear some of your ideas about balancing the character and the changes that have been made. With that being said, this is That One Bronze, signing off.